had always loved thunderstorms, the way the sky seemed to come alive with flashes of light and deep rumbles of thunder. But after what happened that night, I never see them the same way again. It was late, and the storm had been brewing all day. By the time night fell, the rain was pouring down in sheets, and the wind was howling through the trees. I was alone in my small apartment, curled up on the couch with a book, the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the room. I don't live in a fancy building, just an old brick complex on the edge of town, with one window that overlooks a narrow alleyway. There's never much to see, just some dumpsters, graffiti on the opposite wall, and the occasional stray cat. But that night I saw something that still haunts me. I glanced up from my book when a particularly loud clap of thunder shook the walls. In that split second when the room lit up from the lightning, I saw a figure standing at the window, just beyond the glass, staring in. I froze. My heart leapt into my throat. I live on the second floor. There's no balcony, no fire escape, nothing. No one should have been able to stand outside my window like that. I slowly put my book down, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination, maybe a trick of the light. But then, as another flash of lightning illuminated the room, I saw him again. He was still there. A man, standing impossibly close, his face pressed against the glass, watching me. I leapt off the couch and turned off all the lights, my heart racing. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the window, trying to stay out of sight. I had to get a closer look, had to confirm that my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. Carefully, I peeked through the corner of the curtain. He was gone. I let out a shaky breath, but before I could move away, another flash of lightning lit up the alley, and there he was again, standing directly below the window, looking up at me now. His eyes gleamed in the brief light, and I swear I saw him smile. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my phone. I called the police, my hands shaking, as I explained that someone was outside my window. They said they'd send someone over, but the storm had knocked out power in most of the area, and it would take time. As I waited, every minute felt like an hour. I couldn't help but peek out the window again, just to make sure he hadn't come back. The rain was pounding against the glass, and for a moment, I thought I was safe. Then the next flash of lightning came. This time, he wasn't outside. He was standing inside at the foot of my bed. I bolted out of the apartment and didn't return until morning, when the police assured me no one had been found inside. But I know what I saw. I'll never forget his face, or that smile. It had been raining for hours and the roads were starting to flood. I had been driving home from a weekend trip, but the storm hit harder than expected. I was on a narrow back road with no cell service, trying to make my way to the nearest town before the storm got any worse. The rain was so heavy, I could barely see the road ahead of me, and the wind was whipping the trees into a frenzy. I knew I had to pull over and wait it out, but I didn't want to stop in the middle of nowhere. Then through the downpour, I saw it, a small wooden building almost hidden among the trees. It looked like some kind of old roadside shelter or rest stop, and I figured it would be a safer place to wait than the car. I pulled up, parked, and hurried inside. The place was dusty and clearly abandoned, but it was dry. There were a few old benches and a small counter, as if it had once been a rest area for travelers. I sat down on one of the benches and listened to the storm raging outside, grateful for the roof over my head. But then something strange happened, and as I sat there, I noticed the sound of footsteps. At first, I thought it was just the rain or my imagination, but they were unmistakable. Soft, shuffling steps coming from the back of the shelter. I stood up, my heart racing. I called out, but no one answered. The footsteps continued, slowly approaching, the sound echoing in the small space. I shone my phone's flashlight toward the back of the shelter, but there was nothing there, just shadows and the sound of the storm. I took a step toward the door, thinking I should leave, but as soon as I moved, the footsteps stopped. For a moment, everything was silent, just the wind and rain outside, Then, from right behind me, I heard a voice. A whisper. "Don't leave." I spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty, just as it had been before. I grabbed my keys and ran out into the storm, not caring about the rain anymore. I didn't stop driving until I reached the next town, soaked and shaking. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was tired and the storm had made me jumpy. But every time I drive past that stretch of road now, I can't help but feel like someone, is watching me from the trees. This was the kind of storm that rattles windows and makes the whole house creak. I had been staying at my friend Greg's place for a few days, helping him clean out the old house his family had inherited from his grandparents. The place was huge, a bit run down, and full of weird little nooks and crannies that gave it an unsettling vibe. That night, the storm was relentless. The power had flickered on and off for hours, and by midnight, it had finally gone out completely. Greg and I sat in the living room, talking by candlelight, trying to pass the time until the storm let up. The thunder was so loud it drowned out most of our conversation. We were just about to head to bed when we heard it, a loud crash like something had fallen over. It came from the basement. Greg looked at me, his face pale. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. Neither of us had been down to the basement since we'd started cleaning. The door had been stuck, and we figured whatever was down there could wait until we had more time. But now, with the power out and strange noises coming from below, it didn't feel like something we could ignore. We grabbed a couple of flashlights and made our way to the basement door. Greg had to yank it hard to get it open, and a gust of cold, damp air rushed out. The smell of mold and old wood was overpowering. The stairs creaked under our weight as we descended. At the bottom, the basement was even darker than I expected, the beam of my flashlight barely cutting through the thick shadows. The space was cluttered with old furniture, boxes, and random junk. We didn't see anything out of place at first, but then I noticed something strange. There was a mirror, an old, ornate one, leaning against the far wall. It was covered in dust, but what caught my attention wasn't the mirror itself. It was the reflection. In the dim light, I could see Greg and myself standing near the center of the room. But there was something else too. A third figure, standing just behind us. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty, except for us. I shone my flashlight back at the mirror, and the figure was still there. Tall, shadowy, standing motionless behind us, its face obscured. I backed away, my heart pounding, but Greg just stood there staring at the reflection. "Do you see that?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Greg nodded slowly. "It's been there the whole time." I grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the stairs. We ran back up, slamming the door behind us. Neither of us slept that night, and the next morning, we left the house without looking back. Greg later told me his grandparents had always kept the basement locked, and now I understood why.
Thanks for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed the journey. If you loved the twists and turns, don't forget to hit the like button and share the stories with your friends. Make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss out on our next thrilling tale, because there's always a new mystery or adventure just around the corner. Until next time, keep imagining, keep exploring, and remember, nothing is ever quite what it seems.